Otaku USA. Wow. This is either going to be really funny or really sad, depending on how much you care about anime magazines, whether this is something, whether you have a history with this magazine. This is the Spring 2024 issue, and I would be shocked, based on the content of this magazine, if I am not the first person to have purchased this. I was at Walmart. I was really taking my time, you know. I went all the way through the magazine section. Now, my mom used to, for a while, install magazines. She would go to, place to place, take out the magazines they don't have and whatever's there and replace them with the new issues, the latest updates. And she said most of the time, most of the magazines would just get thrown away. Most of them were never purchased. You would just take out a huge number of unsold magazines, replace them with the new ones. I don't really know why magazines still exist. I don't know who they're for. I don't know if it's just people like me who will go in and nostalgia purchase something like this. And I justified this to myself because I already knew I wanted to have a video coming out, every off Thursday. Every Thursday that I don't have a written video, I want to have something else coming out on the We Watch Anime channel. So I knew I was going to make a video about this, but I thought it would just be like a fun, cute little, hey, look, anime magazines. I can't believe they're still real. But the state of this magazine is a lot poorer than I expected. It is, well, all right, let's crack it open, right? I mean, what you would expect, there's lots of ads. Assumably it exists because advertisers will keep paying for it to exist, but what are the demographic numbers they're putting up? Is it just that distributors want to have like the image of having anime magazine, so they just pick the most popular one and that's allowed it to exist? I don't really get the logic of how this exists when no one's reading it. I know nobody is reading this magazine, except for me. And the reason I'm reading it is that anime magazines are how I got into anime. I was a big magazine kid in the late 90s. I was reading Nintendo Power. I was reading Beckett Pokemon Collector. And when anime started to become really a thing in the wake of Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, and Sailor Moon in the late 90s, there was Anime Invasion magazine, and the first issue of that, reading that cover to cover, is what made anime a thing in my mind. And a lot of the way I tackle anime, I see it as very magazine-esque, where I'm highlighting all these different things and bringing together the whole of anime into one place as something to talk about. At least that's my ideal of what an anime magazine would be. And it's more of what Anime Invasion felt like back then. Back when there were stories to tell in magazines. Because, when Anime Invasion came out, the cover story was, here's all the stuff that was cut out of the American release of your favorite shows, which was news to me as a kid. There was not an online place to just read, every single thing that had been cut out of Dragon Ball Z. There wasn't a TV tropes page or whatever. So, this mattered at a time. But now that the internet exists, it's very, very difficult to justify the existence of anime magazines, especially if they're not doing something incredibly unique. It would be one thing if it was if it had the energy of being a fan-run publication. And this is a fan-run publication, okay? The people who write for this magazine, the people who create this magazine, these people, I know who these people are. I've seen some of these people at conventions. I've, been to their panels. These people know anime. They care about anime. They don't care about this magazine. I do not believe anyone gives a fuck about this magazine. Nobody's trying. Nobody. Maybe this person. This person cared about this anime. We'll get to that. But I don't believe anybody really cares about the state of this magazine. And it's because there's only so much they can really do. It is a commercial property. It is built to promote anime and manga, a huge section of the magazine is just manga. This is just flip it over, read it the other way. Here's a whole ass 2 chapters of manga. That's like half the thickness of the magazine by itself. And half of the content is advertisements. So it's impressive that there's even enough text in this magazine to last me multiple bathroom trips. But it's a little deceiving because it might look like there's a lot of text. But I have a unique way of approaching how I read magazines. I tend not to care too much about the middle content, all of the cover story stuff, this stuff, because it's usually just promotional. It's usually just like introducing you to a show that I could just watch. Like basically the statement that is made by these anime being cover stories is like, we think these are good, or like this is stuff that the distributors are really trying to push, or even just like this is stuff that we could get a press kit about, like this is the stuff that they wanted us to talk about in the magazine, so that's what we're talking about. This is very consistent with any anime or gaming magazine I've read pretty much. The midsection is now granted, once again, this used to be like news, like this used to be legitimately teaching you about these shows that you probably hadn't heard of. But in the internet age, I can just go on my anime list and read the about page and get almost all of the information that I can get out of this magazine. And there used to be anime magazines that could get like interviews with creators and stuff for each of these features, at least something, maybe a director comments on it or a character designer, somebody says something. New Type magazine is a great example for this. There's always some kind of little interview in there. You'll notice there is an interview with Steven Maeda. It is at the very back of the magazine, with Daryl Surat, who is the best writer, the best person involved, the person putting in the most effort effortlessly. Like I know enough about Daryl to know that I don't think he needs to put in a ton of effort to make the best content that's in this magazine. But this is the most of a legitimate piece of content that's in here. It's the very back. It's an interview with like the producer who made, he's producer, showrunner, developer, and writer. So I guess, the guy who made this One Piece live action basically possible, who made it any good. The long and short of this is he was told like that they were already making a live action show nebulously. It was already in development. They attached a writer to it. That was him. He hadn't read One Piece, so he read, he knew they were planning to adapt the first 100 chapters. So he read that, loved it, ended up reading the entire manga, and, ended up working very closely to try to figure out how they're going to make it possible. That's all basically that you're going to get out of this. But sure, cool. This is normal magazine content. It's the only interview in the magazine. And I tend to, because I don't care about the middle stuff, I tend to work through a magazine like forwards and backwards at the same time, where I'll read some of the stuff in the front, some of the stuff in the back, whichever direction seems more interesting. In this case, the back was more interesting. So we got some cosplay photography, that's fine, whatever. The only one of these that really stood out to me, I really like this cosplay of like I assume it's one of Char's Gundams. There's a tips for cosplay. This reads kind of like a WikiHow article. Just very, very basic, like beginner stuff that anybody who is able to achieve any of these photos definitely knows already. So this is like how to make your photos look more like these photos. But it's not very detailed advice. You could definitely do better. Here's some game reviews. These are mostly like, yeah, these games suck. This one, they really liked the story, but it's like a Muso game with Fate, so whatever. The Final Fantasy 16 review is pretty positive. It didn't... I know that these games are too big to like communicate anything really about the game through this amount of text. Like, I got the vague impression through reading this that it's pretty similar to a Xenoblade game. That's the impression I got. But that's... They liked that one. They didn't really like the Detective Pikachu one so much. they liked Mario Wonder. This person, not so much the Sonic game. All right, this is where stuff got really weird. Okay, this is where this magazine really got strange. This is a review of Godzilla 2000 on DVD. I don't know if this is like a new release just happening of this Godzilla movie. Godzilla movies are relentlessly re-released or shelved or like hidden from public for a century and then suddenly come back. Whatever. This is a competent review of Godzilla 2000. It goes into lots of details about like the production and stuff. If you've watched any like YouTube videos that go through Godzilla movies, of which there's a lot. Anybody who knows Godzilla, if you care about Godzilla, if you've done any research on Godzilla, you know all this. It checks out. It's written by a guy, J.L. Carosa, who is the author of Japanese special effects cinema, Godfathers of Tokusatsu books. So clearly this person knows what they're talking about, right? So that's all fine and good. Now I want you to read this carefully. Look very carefully at this paragraph. Toho had formally ended their legendary flagship monster fan. Okay. Now, here's the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla review. Do you recognize this paragraph? It's the same review. The Godzilla 2000 review was reprinted again in the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla column. It's the exact same text as the previous. How do you get to this level of formatting without realizing that you have put the same text? You have fit everything to that text. Like, unless it's maybe this is a pre-built format to hold exactly 500 words. And so the assumption was just like, well, they're just exactly the same length. So somebody messed up their Control-C, Control-V. I wouldn't be surprised if there is look, this is probably copied from the fucking book, right? Like, it's probably the same information. I'm sure there was, at some point, submitted to this magazine a Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla review, but it's not in it. This is why I know that nobody's reading this magazine. So that was a shocking discovery to me. And it really got me looking in depth, like trying to find the seams in this thing. I mean, the content here is barely existent, right? Like, Patrick Macias is the editor-in-chief. He's been around forever. Otaku USA is basically like a sequel to Animerica, for which Patrick Macias, I think, like, took over when they made that switch. And man, I remember that magazine being very different. I remember this magazine not being quite at this level of like self-parody, but this editorial is just a summary of what is in the magazine, and then like, so what else is going on? Well, Christmas and New Year's coming up. All the stores in Tokyo are blaring Christmas music. All those important KFC buckets coming out. You know how it is here in Japan. Oh, yeah. Godzilla and Hayao Miyazaki both did a big deal in 2003. Isn't that nice? Isn't it cool that, Japanese film sure is back on top. This should have been the whole, like, this paragraph. If this had been, like, a thought piece about this, but it's just like, hey, did you hear? It's so it is so non-effortful. Nothing really interesting in the Q&A section. It jumps immediately into like ad articles. Like, the first thing before you even get to like anything informational, it's just like, here's some expensive toys. Maybe the idea is that, like, if this magazine sells, like, even one of these $298 Ghost in the Shell SAC 2045 watches, then the whole entire endeavor will have been worth it. Maybe the margins are that slim. Who the fuck wants this? No, did anybody like SAC 2045? I've heard no one talk about it ever. Also, this doesn't look like a Ghost in the Shell. Anyway, and I'm not going to start talking about the products that they're talking about. There's a whole page just to this goofy looking ass. This is not a good picture of this toy. I don't know if that's the intended effect, but it's not great. Oh, man. So I read this review. This person actually definitely cared about this show. They get kind of emotional writing it. There was a moment as I was reading it that I was like, man, this woman really connected with this anime. Then I saw the name was Gerald, so maybe I shouldn't assume their gender, but it's they certainly it had an effect on them. I did not read this Zom 100 review, but every review in this magazine feels the need to start off by pointing out that whatever thing that they're talking about has been done before. Like, zombie anime is a very well-trodden area. Like all other types of undead media, it's a genre so well-trodden that it spawned subgenres. Idol Zombies, Zombieland Saga, like, they do this all the time. I kind of get the desire to, like, you know, maybe say, hey, you've heard of this other stuff, right? Check out this one too. But, like, I'd really prefer if you wrote these from the perspective that, like, maybe the reader hasn't fucking seen any of these shows. Like, some of these, oh man, I'm trying to remember which one. Yeah, it was in this one. This bothered me. Supernatural romance has been a popular thing for, well, pretty much forever. However, that term also carries with it some associations, especially now, about what to expect, namely that there will be a vampire, werewolf, or perhaps both in the case of some major franchises. Like, I get this is a Twilight joke, but Twilight's fucking 20 years old. Like, this is just so out of touch. Yeah, there were vampire and werewolf romances in anime as well afterwards for a long time. It was a hit franchise all over the world. Not really anymore, though. Like, so it just seems so... It's like, I jumped into this thinking that I was still living in 20 years ago, but turns out anime is still modernizing. Like, I don't know. It was... I didn't bother with this one. This is where they start to feel, to me, more adverty, because there's just so much image and so little text. And again, I can get way more information about these shows. I mean, I fucking read a Mal review would be way more detailed than what I'm getting out of these reviews. I did think this was funny though, because even the payola infused magazine has to admit that Fooly Cooly Grudge fucking sucks, and that this whole endeavor has maybe been a mistake. Don't call it manga. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they mean by that. I don't really justify that in the text of this article. I do believe I read this and thought this manga sounded kind of neat. This is usually the section where I get the most information, because manga is pretty hard to keep up with. Like, compared to anime, like, anime has a lot of online, like, centralized hubs for just, you know, finding everything that's coming out, finding opinions about everything that's coming out. There's not as much of that, at least that I know of, with manga. I could just be out of touch myself, but I do feel like giving a big, like, manga review and recommendation section has always been, like, the strongest section of this map. Just now my phone died, and it gave me time to actually process this ad. These are my two favorite Pokemon movies. Pokemon Movie 2 and 21, the Lugia back-to-back. Anyway, so to me, the manga section represents by far the biggest value proposition of this magazine, possibly the only value proposition of this magazine, in that there's 25 manga reviews. Most of them are recommending at least somewhat interesting seeming manga. There are some new releases I'd be excited about, like Yokohama Shopping Log and Homunculus, both reviews provided by Daryl Surratt. And, you know, these are... I mean, again, this is all information I could just easily get on the internet. If I was really curious about any of these manga, I could learn way more by reading a review that's not, like, 200 words. This one's about a manga where Superman uses his powers to cook food, apparently. But what fascinates me the most about this section is that there are 25 reviews here between 8 authors, one of whom only wrote one. And they're in such an odd arrangement where, like, it'll kind of go back and forth between one and another author for a couple pages, and then like another couple, but sometimes it'll just be like two from the same author back to back, and then at the very end there's just like a ton from the same author all clustered together. I think it's here. Yeah, Brittany Vincent. Like, all of her reviews are right here, and it just gives the impression that these were like printed in exactly the order they were submitted. Like, you know, the people who got their stuff in early were in first, and then it just was like, you know, Brittany got everything in at the very end. And then, and that, you know, goes right into the actual manga section. So being a manga fan will get you by far the most value out of Otaku USA, in that you get some manga samples, you get some manga recommendations. I mean, this is a $7 magazine. It's $25 for the 4 issues that you would get. So it's really like kind of like that's the price of one of these manga, you know, like you could flip through this in the store, make it like with a notepad, write down the names of the stuff you saw in the magazine, and go buy the actual manga. This is the weirdest article, by the way. This One Piece article is nothing. It's just like, hey, One Piece is in the news, right? Like, One Piece is trending. This feels like an AI, like, told the magazine, like, your cover story should be One Piece, you know? It doesn't say, it just is like a vague, like, it's 2 pages just describing One Piece. Like, yep, it sure is a big deal still. But it's also, like, kind of preposterous, because it says things like, kicking off in 1997, it's hard to imagine a time when One Piece wasn't an utterly massive sensation. And it's like, well, that's not true. Like, when I was young, One Piece was not a big deal. You know, certainly not in the U.S. Nobody cared about One Piece until, honestly, One Piece didn't really blow up in the U.S. until the 2010s, I would say, when the story had gotten so massive that it was to a point where it was unavoidable, where, like, you couldn't be an anime, you couldn't say you like anime and avoid somebody bringing up One Piece, because it's the most popular anime. But, like, that just wasn't really known to people in the U.S. until, like, way deep into the run. And certainly a magazine like this, like, all these people know this. These people remember a time when One Piece wasn't utterly massive. Who wrote this article? I can't even tell. They don't even have their name on the article. So, yeah, that's annoying. And then the rest of these are just, like, Nothing Burger promotionals, just talking about the show in a really general way. You know, the Free Rent article, this I found annoying. I always tend to get drawn to, like, the little one-paragraph boxes first, and then I'll kind of work my way out to the bigger stuff. I mentioned Violet Evergarden being of similar design to Frieren Beyond Journey's End, but I think a more apt comparison would be Mario Okada's Makia. There's no pictures here, so, like, this means nothing to me. If I haven't seen those, obviously I have seen both of those 2 shows, but, like, fucking, who gives a shit? Why are you comparing it to stuff that you're not even showing us? This one confused me too. Why are we talking about a place further than the universe all of a sudden? I don't know if this is, like, newly getting a Western release. This is another part of the thing that's confusing about these anime magazines, is that they're aimed primarily at people, United States audiences who buy media. But that can mean now, like, people who buy streaming services or who buy DVDs, which can be different audiences. Like, this show was on Crunchyroll in 2018. It was talked about. I know they had stories about it in Otaku USA. Why are they pretending to introduce us to this 2018 anime? Is it just that Michael Goldstein, like, finally watched it and thought it was really good and decided to... It's just so random. Currently streaming on Crunchyroll. appearing on the best TV shows of 2018 list. Yeah, we know this stuff. This was 6 fucking years ago. Why is this happening? Michael Goldstein also wrote this review of the Netflix One Piece. Generally positive. This is a decent review. This was like a review that made me think, all right, yeah, maybe I'll check out that Netflix One Piece show. I feel like I know what to expect. And then I read this, and then I read these Godzilla reviews, and I was like, what the fuck? And, you know, returning to the game reviews also, they're all written by 2 people. It's just Joseph Luster and Brittany Vincent over and over again. So, like, there's really only, like, 10 people contributing to this magazine, like, making it possible. I don't understand how there is 10 paychecks worth of profit to be made from this magazine's existence. There's just no fucking way anybody's reading this except for me right now to make fun of it. And now you, by way of me making fun of it. So that's the Spring 2024 Otaku USA. It wasn't all bad. I thought that the besides the One Piece story that made no fucking sense, the coverage of the live action show was fine. You know, the interview with the producer was fine. These game reviews were pretty boring. I just would not... This wouldn't be my end-all for, like, the reviews of those games. You know, this wouldn't be my stopping point. I did not get a review of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I got a wasted page in my magazine. I don't understand why there's a cover story about an ancient anime. At least Frieren is, like, current zeitgeist. I don't know why Frieren's not on the cover, also. What the fuck is Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts? Maybe Frieren was on the previous cover. Like, that would make sense to me. This is the popular anime. If this anime was on the cover of this magazine, I would believe that people would have bought this. No one is talking about Sacrificial Princess and the King of fucking Beasts. I don't even know if this is out or not. I don't even know if this is about an anime that's coming out or an anime that's already out. I've heard no talk about this. The director, Chiaki Kon. Oh, a terrible anime director. Great. I'm sure this show is great. Oh, man. At least this manga looks kind of cool. I didn't bother reading it. But anyway, that's Otaku USA. Thanks for watching. If you're seeing this video right now, it means that Anime with Personality is out. The newest written analysis video for my people on Backed.buy. Anybody who gives me $1 on Backed.buy, $7 on Substack, or $5 on Patreon, you can get your name into those written videos by giving a little bit more on each of those platforms. And that video will be public on this channel next week, next Thursday. That's it, folks. Thanks for watching. I'm glad that we all got to share this pain together. Anime forever.